So ladies and gentlemen, welcome to my no spoilers review for what is our launching point into the new DCU Creature Commandos, which is coming your way with the debut of the first two episodes Thursday, December 5th, so literally this week on Max, followed by one episode weekly until January 9th. Now, I've had a chance to see all 7 episodes of Creature Commandos thanks to Warner Brothers, and as usual here, and I want to stress, I aim to give you a comprehensive as can possibly be review of the show, like just giving you a good impression going in, all without any spoilers. So just know that you really don't have to worry about that. And you may be thinking, but how do you speak for so long in a no spoiler review without giving away any spoilers? Well, I guess that's just me. I mean, as per the channel name. So right away, for those who are perhaps fairly new to this or new to the channel, the official trailer teases Waller saying that General Flagg has found himself in the middle of an international incident. And as per the official description provided to me, Creature Commandos tracks a secret team of incarcerated monsters recruited for missions deemed too dangerous for humans. When all else fails, they're your last, worst option. And given that Congress has told Waller that she can't use humans for missions after the Task Force X whole deal got exposed by her daughter in Peacemaker Season 1 in the finale, well, Rick Flag utilizes a new task force, Task Force M. But before we get into like the deeper dive of this, I kind of thought to myself, if I was watching this review on the other side of my channel or the other side of the screen, what is it that I would want to know most right away? And the question would be, at least for me, does Creature Commandos do a good job at launching us into James Gunn's DCU? Well, to set expectations here, first of all, think about it. It's literally a show set in the canon of the new DCU. So absolutely be prepared for a sense of exposition to James Gunn's new world that, as we know, already has an established history of heroes to villains to metahumans, you name it. But with that being said, we can't forget how this is only 7 episodes long, with actually most of the episodes being around 21 to 23 minutes, with I think only around 2 episodes going from 25 to 28 minutes. So what I'm trying to get at here is that the show, all while it delivers that, it is also, of course, very focused on telling the story of the Creature Commandos and the mission that they're on. Now, having just spoken about 7 episodes, I think it does make the pacing of the series really decent, and given the run times of the episodes, that has credits included, by the way, they really just don't hold back. So you're going from beat to beat to beat, and there isn't really any wasted time. It's just really snappy and only ever slows the momentum on carefully selected moments, I'd say, that service the characters in the story. So don't get expectations to the point of imagining crazy lore dumps about this hero or that villain or this major place or that major place in the DCU. But, of course, there are mentions of things ranging from as simple as other popular DC cities to, yes, other really big world-building teasers that I actually didn't see coming, that I think is going to be a really pleasantly surprising thing for people when they see it. So, with all of that under consideration, I'd still, for me at least, take the first live-action DCU movie coming our way next summer, which is, of course, Superman, as the proper introduction into the DCU, which I do think most people are doing anyway. And Creature Commandos, overall, as Gunn explains, take that as more of this aperitif, which I do think, as he described it, is the best way to put a label on it. But speaking of the mission that they go on here, to not say too much here, because again, I can't give too much away, but what I can say is that this one actually surprised me quite a bit. A few episodes in, the main story really ramps up with the introduction of what I would describe vaguely as a larger threat, to the point of where I was like, what the... Wait, what? Like, the stakes are pretty insane when you realize what's going on, to the point of Waller herself being very concerned. And trust me on this, when you get into that moment a few episodes in, and you'll know it when you see it, and what comes of that in the moment, it really is kind of like, holy shit, I did not expect that. Let's go. Now, that's not me trying to overhype it, but I'm genuinely saying, and you guys should know me by now, for me to be like, oh, damn, okay, that must be pretty cool, if you know what I mean. So I know I'm talking very ambiguously here, but the story that they've put into focus this season is one that is, what I would say is quite crafty, has some twists and turns, and I was quite impressed with the scope of what the Creature Commandos were dealing with, and the way it all ultimately goes down right up until the finale ends. But to get back to the root of the subject here, like, what do I actually think of the show? Well, if you couldn't tell already, I can happily say that I really, really enjoyed myself, and I really do mean that. I know some people will be like, well, Boba, of course you'd enjoy it. You cover a lot of DCU-related content on the channel. But seriously, it's a really enjoyable animated show with an absolutely fantastic cast and well animated. We're going to get into all of that. If you're a fan of the tone that they've got across in the trailers, and you're a fan of Gunn's experience in the sandbox of playing with multiple characters like this, I would be very hard-pressed to believe you not having a good time with Creature Commandos. Sure, you're going to be impressed by little Easter eggs here and there, and I can't wait to talk about those when we get to those episode breakdowns, with moments every now and again that are just really big perks that will absolutely lead to a bit of a DiCaprio, Rick Dalton meme-pointing moment to the screen every now and again. So honestly, I'm just trying to get the message out there very clear. Don't worry about stuff like that, because I think a lot of you guys will be like, oh, okay. But the show itself and the substance it offers and the characters it surrounds is exactly what you would want, what you would actually want for a Gunn project of this type. But it is also important for me to stress that this is a project of that type from Gunn. So what I mean to say there is, I know people make assessments that a lot of Gunn's projects have been about like a group of misfits banding together in a fairly formulaic way, and sure, like that's something that can't really be denied here. I mean, you have Guardians of the Galaxy, you have Peacemaker, you have the Suicide Squad, and now another team that is banded together in Creature Commandos. Now, all while that point has been made, and I wouldn't dismiss it, it doesn't mean that it's a situation of, oh, I've seen this before, this isn't worth watching if it's just going to be the same thing. It is a template that does work for the characters he specifically chooses to tackle. And to kind of dive a little bit deeper into this, I don't really agree with what I'd view as reductive when people say it is just the same thing with simply a new coat of paint. I would say to that, no, absolutely not. Like, Creature Commandos, all while maintaining this formula and recipe that Gunn, a recipe for success, I would say, it didn't make me second guess its existence after having seen all the episodes now, because it is ultimately just a blast. And I think, for a fun little animated aperitif project going into the DCU, it is like a sure, absolutely, why not situation. And furthermore, if anything, just as a side note here, I'm excited to see how Gunn adapts to this change from his formula, given that he's releasing Superman next year, which, all while it does have these other characters and superheroes in the Superman movie, it's not aimed to be as ensemble-esque, and so it will be a step away from the approach that he's had with his projects over the past few years. But getting back into this, I want to say that I do believe this series kind of does have it all. Like, it has the comedic James Gunn moments interwoven throughout most scenes, yet as usual, within the writing of each episode, it's served with another layer of depth that evokes quite a bit of emotion and a growing fondness and care for this series and its characters as each episode unfolds. Now, one way that they actually get into the roots of this and achieve that great blend is when you're introduced to the story. Of course, as they get across in their trailers, the Creature Commandos are enlisted by Waller and put under the command of Rick Flag Sr. to go on their mission, which brings them to Princess Ilana Rostovic. But throughout their time on this mission, as those episodes unfold, flashbacks are provided to give more depth to the characters in the show, which I will definitely 100% double down greatly enriches their present day roles, because it may not seem like you emotionally connect to them right away as when you pick up with these characters. It's called Task Force M for a reason. You know, a lot of them are monsters and come across quite cold, and if anything, quite unappealing for the most part, other than the sweet Nina Mazursky, of course, who is just gonna melt your heart. So, for sure, when I say not all of them are monsters, I mean, they are, but, you know, some more than others in the name of that. But seeing their past explored, and it shouldn't really have surprised me here, but I connected and felt for some of the characters way more than I ever thought I would, and you could tell that they put a lot of time and effort into making that really work, and for me, they succeeded, because at the end of the day, they brought that emotion out in me, which I was cautious, as I said, as to if they would or not, but they did. And I mean, for crying out loud, I felt for Weasel. I mean, bloody Weasel. I did not expect that. Now, the reason why I'm bringing up emotion and why it's important that the series clicked with me on that level is because this is a huge component into what makes an audience connect with, you know, a Hollywood product, whether that be a movie, a TV show, or whatever else. So if you've paid attention to what's been covered on the channel over the past couple of years, or just what James Gunn has said about the DCU in general, you would know that this approach to storytelling is a huge priority for him. Just with regards to like what makes the audience connect with TV shows and movies, and maybe what isn't working so much anymore, and that is, you know, the commentary about the repetition of heavy focus on spectacle. But when you really prioritize characters and emotion, it goes such a long way. It makes the stakes matter, it makes the characters matter beyond just the first coat of paint of them seeming cool. The point is, the audience now cares, and that's powerful, and Creature Commandos is another example of how James Gunn just succeeds again in this department. But I suppose this now brings me to the characters and the cast in general. The cast did an absolutely fantastic job here, and I really do mean that. So, to list them, the cast includes Steve Agee as Economos. He was in Peacemaker in the Suicide Squad. Maria Bakalova as Princess Ilana Rostovic. Anya Chalotra as Circe. Zoe Chow as Nina Mazursky. Frank Grillo as Rick Flag Sr., Sean Gunn as G.I. Robot and Weasel, David Harbour as Frankenstein, Alan Tudyk as Dr. Phosphorus, Indira Varma as the Bride, and Viola Davis as Amanda Waller. But of course, you do have some other, you know, characters who pop up in there. You know, you have Alan Tudyk voicing Clayface, as well as Will Magnus, among a couple of other things. But I think the question I would want answered from me, this is the way I'm really trying to think about this review, is who is the standout character? So I think the standout character for me in Creature Commandos, and I do have to say, this is pretty hard to choose because you know what Gunn's like. He makes you connect with all of them, especially with their backstories, some more than others. But for me, it was probably the Bride. Indira Varma does such, I know I keep saying this, but she does such a good job at bringing the Bride to life. And as James Gunn said, and what I can tease here, this was at New York Comic Con, she is for sure like this apparent lead in the show, despite, you know, Rick Flag Sr. being obviously quite a lead as well. But the bride, she's just as tough as nails on the exterior, and yet through those cracks, she has a good heart, which she, you know, hides from the world. And with just the context of her origins and how they're tied in with David Harbour's Eric Frankenstein, it's just dark. And I mean dark. Like, once again, to revisit that conversation from a moment ago, once you see what she's endured and just the overall conditions of her creation to that origin, it injects a whole new attachment to the character that you'll get, where you'll just say, oh, like, I get it now. And then you're totally signed up to see more. When initially the bride starts off as, and most of the characters again, it's like, oh, okay, like, you know, okay, like they're getting along, okay, but then it gets you and it peels back a layer, another layer. Whereas for David Harbour's Eric Frankenstein, man, there is really only one way to describe his character, and that would be that he's a total child, a toddler even. And just like a child who doesn't really get what they want at times, he throws tantrums, he's incredibly impulsive, and as a result, he's pretty damn dangerous. But on the flip side of that, he's also hilarious, because kind of acting like that does lead to some funny situations. But given the whole Frankenstein aspect of it, you're not without empathy for his character, as he's just so desperate for love. Admittedly, not that I was, you know, connected with him as emotionally as I was with other characters, but, you know, David Harbour manages to play Eric's situation so well. You get what he's about and what he's after. He's still an arsehole, but, like, he is really funny. And his dynamic with Rick Flag and the moments between them as you get throughout the season was actually quite a highlight for me, to the point of where, you know, I would actually love to see that in live action, and you'll have to see what I mean when you see it for yourself. Now, actually, speaking of Frank Grillo, he is just great as Rick Flag Sr., and I really mean that. It left me really excited to see more from him. As we know, not only is he going from Creature Commandos in this animated role, to also then play Rick Flag Sr. in the live-action Superman, and then in Peacemaker Season 2. Now, one thing I think is kind of important for me to mention, actually, when talking about Rick Flag Sr. is with regards to just, and this extends to all the characters, I suppose, with their potential for crossing over into live action, is just from, like, animation to live action. The characters in Creature Commandos do act a bit more animated, which may sound like, duh, like in an animated show makes sense. But of course, like, not to the extent of like a anime performance, if you know what I mean there. I mention this because Frank Grillo did say in an interview, and I forget from where, but he did say that he's a bit different in Peacemaker Season 2 compared to Creature Commandos. Now, of course, this may just be for, like, story reasons, but I think just acting in live action compared to voicing and animation is always going to be a tad different. Like, you don't get the whole demeanor, you know, being lifelike, the temperament and everything to the character. The tone of a live action series, even Peacemaker, may feel a bit different. So all I'm saying is I don't expect him to be fully the same, but we're gonna have to wait and see. He's actually also 100%, like, not what I expected. Flag is like an honor-bound, dutiful character. He takes his job seriously with a very kind heart. And I say this because I thought he'd be such a hard-ass on everyone, but he really isn't. He really just seems to be a cool and badass guy. And it just, again, makes me all the more excited to see how that transitions into live action. And, you know, of course, the beef that he's going to have with Peacemaker, considering that he killed Rick Flag Sr.'s son. Now, G.I. Robot is just brilliant. He is a character who is obsessed with wanting to be back in action like he was in World War II. And again, it shouldn't have surprised me, but I got attached to this character more than what I thought. Like, Sean Gunn, I totally forgot Sean Gunn was voicing him here. He did a great job. G.I. Robot, for anyone who's, like, played the Wolfenstein games, I remember playing those on Xbox years and years and years ago. It is something right out of that with how much carnage he can cause. I bet, honestly, if you gave G.I. Robot Wolfenstein to play, it would be the best present of his life, considering who you're up against in those games. Now, don't get me started on Nina Mazursky. Gunn already teased at New York Comic Con that she's essentially the heart of this show, and I can most certainly agree with that. She really isn't remotely distasteful, and it's quite the opposite. She's probably a bit too kind, but this just adds for another great dynamic with other characters who are a bit more rough and the opposite, such as the Bride, and she's also got a great dynamic with G.I. Robot, with ultimately a backstory to tug at your heartstrings. Now, as for Dr. Phosphorus, what I can say is, you know, it's just awesome seeing a character like this exist in the DCU canon and actually see it be done in the show. He's a very powerful, borderline overpowered character with his radiation abilities. You know, Alan Tudyk, you know, what more is there for me to say other than he's exceptionally talented, which is a surprise to no one, to the point of where he's voicing multiple characters in the show. And Dr. Phosphorus comes across as one of, if not the most attached monsters in Creature Commandos, but not without a very, very good reason. And you'll see why when you get into his history a little bit later on into the season, which is an episode that I can't wait to talk about for some other interesting things I can't talk about reasons. Now, speaking of things I can't really talk about too much, we have the wonderful Anya Chalotra as Circe, and she is just outright cool. Honestly, I know like my words are a bit lackluster there, but she's cool. She really is. I want to see more. I need to see more, and I hope we actually will get given what Gunn commented and teased even recently again, with the possibility of her appearing in live action one day. Now, let's just say, as per the interviews that were bleeding out of New York Comic Con, not just from Gunn, but the showrunner of Creature Commandos, there's definitely Themyscira exposition that comes with Circe, especially with regards to her motives and how she is first introduced into the show. And even though she's not in it a ton, and that's like the only, you know, if you even want to call this criticism, one of the only criticisms I have is maybe wanting to see more of some characters like this. It may sound contradictory to what I just said, but she actually plays a much larger role than I could have imagined, which ties into the larger stakes of the story for this season. Her powers are really cool, and there's honestly not much else I can say without getting into spoilers, so we'll have to get into certain other things there in my episode breakdowns when those episodes release. Now, Maria Bakalova as Ilana Rostovic, she's great too, and again, I know my hands are kind of tied here, but she's quite central to the plot, you know, at the foundation of the mission that the Creature Commandos go on, so I don't want to give too much away here. Her interactions with Rick Flag Sr. are very, 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 very interesting, and we're about to get into that in terms of, like, the broader context of the adult tones of this show. Visually, moving on here, you know, I think this series looks great. I do want to put it out there. I don't talk about animation a lot. I'm not an animation expert, you know, because I don't really cover animations a whole lot on the channel. I say this because sometimes people complain about an animation looking bad, like War of Rohirrim from Warner Brothers that I'm looking forward to. I think it looks pretty cool. And I'm like, really? I think the animation looks pretty sick there. You know, I've seen Invincible and things like that. So coming from me, for what it's worth, I think Creature Commandos looks great, especially with what they did in the action scenes, because they get hectic and obviously, with animation, as we all know, you can get away with doing a lot more when it's not live action and you're not relying on like a crazy budget to achieve battles that you will go on to see in these episodes with frickin' Circe blasts blowing things up and whatnot. Now, speaking of action, the stuff you see though, it's definitely an adult show. Like, they've teased that a lot at Comic-Con, that, as I was just teasing as well, things get quite explicit with Rick Flag Sr. and Ilana Rostovic, and it most certainly does. They really don't shy away from that. But even when it gets to action and fight scenes and whatnot, when you can see what G.I. Robot does, which you get a little bit of a teaser of in the trailer, to Dr. Phosphorus, to the Bride, hell, I would just say anyone at this point, it gets messy, like real messy, and the way that they animate that is just devilishly, diabolically fantastic in the most goriest of ways. Now, this brings me to the music. This, of course, wouldn't be a James Gunn project without a kick-ass soundtrack, and it has some amazing needle drop moments that fit so well and make those scenes so memorable. Like, you forget for a minute. You're watching Creature Commandos, and then, like, the song just starts playing, and you're like, imagine this scene without this song. And not only that, they pulled a song out of the billions of songs out there in today's existence, and in this one, it's like you can't imagine any other song being there. There are too many needle drop moments for me to mention, and I can't really get into that many of them without getting into spoilers, but, if I had to pick one, or just one that instantly comes to my mind, is the scene with G.I. Robot and that song that plays. And you'll see what I mean. So to close this review off, guys, overall, Creature Commandos is what I wanted it to be, but actually, I would say if not more. To put it in another way, is that I am, as you guys know, looking forward to the DCU starting off and, seeing what's possible with this show. But of course, I'm kind of like, looking forward to Superman like 1,000 times more. But yet, this show pleasantly exceeded any expectations that I had. It's a really good, appetizer to the DCU. And again, that's all it ever needed to be. Now, having said that point just there, I hope that people don't put, that pressure or this burden on the show, because it is just that, like an appetizer. It's not the first live-action cinematic movie, Superman, where you would have a level of expectations from major big players being tackled to God knows what else. Creature Commandos is just a cool-ass animated show. I mean, I think if you go into this knowing what you're getting, whether that be in terms of tone, what the show is striving to present to you compared to that of like a main DCU big game movie like Superman, then I think that's the best way to do it. Now, that's not me like putting down the show, by the way, being like, yeah, temper your expectations, cause God. No, I can already predict like a certain wave of people being like, this is the first introduction to the DCU, this animated show. Like, don't forget what this show, this show was never trying to like flex itself as like, again, Hollywood movie level kind of thing. And when you take it for what it is, it's just a great product. Now, the only criticisms that I personally had for this show are just honestly like convenient moments here and there that make things seem a little bit contrived, to the point of where it's the kind of thing where I get people in the comments saying, Boba, you're nitpicking. So that kind of stuff. But I also know that this stuff is a little bit more common when it comes to animated shows. And perhaps, one other criticism would be just more time spent with some other of my more favorite characters that I enjoyed. But again, can't really get into too much detail there. With that being said, there's my Creature Commandos no spoilers review. I think it's a great thing that they're doing a double episode drop. Not that the first episode is bad, it's just if you only watch that first 21-minute episode and you have to wait like 7 days, I do feel like the momentum would be a bit like, slower for getting into the series or the interest of the series. So the fact that 2 episodes drop is just a great thing. And then, of course, it's going to be weekly from there on out. So make sure you subscribe to the channel for the episode recap, reviews, and breakdowns. Anyway, let me know your thoughts on what I had to say. Are you excited for it? Are you apprehensive? Leave a like on this video if you did enjoy it. Did it make you more excited for Creature Commandos? But I'm going to love you and leave you now. So all that's left to say is thank you so much for your support on the channel. I hope you guys have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you fellow Creature Commandos in the next video. Goodbye.